If I understand your question correctly, you're asking me, there is a number of complaint files relative to police abuse, and then there may be a number that are not reported.
Right.
And what's the difference? Right. A significant number of police abuse, or significant numbers of those kinds of cases are underreported for the very reasons we've been talking about. There is no accountability. And over time, in some communities that have experienced the worst of that, there's no expectation of accountability. And not only is there no expectation of accountability, there is an expectation of further abuse or retaliation or some penalty, some impunity as a result of you trying to make a complaint about an officer's conduct. We've seen that quite a bit. And when I was listening to my co-panelists up here, the question I do want to ask both of them is, have you ever been abused physically by the police as a result of any of your work?
Well, I think abuse is have I had like a beating from being pulled over and like that? No, but I mean, I have been roughed up and slammed around. I've been thrown into the back of cars. I've had them deprive me of things.
That is the reluctance in the community that I was talking about when we said we may not be your advocate. We may not be there for you if something goes wrong. What came to their mind is circumstances that are a little more severe in terms of the consequences to them should they piss the police officer off or challenge his authority when they know that on the streets time has shown them that really they don't have any rights that need to be recognized by this guy, and there's no way for them to assert them safely.
And
I would also argue that a lot of times, like in New Jersey recently, I was approached by an officer who was very aggressive and who afterwards clearly stated he was trying to intimidate me. And I think if I would have gave into that, he very might, to that intimidation, he very well could have beat me. But I think he realized that not only did I have a camera, but I knew what I was talking about, and there might have been somebody else around. So that's probably, some of my knowledge has probably also kept me from being beat by police officers. So it's
I'd like to follow that up with, as a former police officer, why do the police unions stand behind corrupt and immoral police officers? I mean, obviously, they catch an officer beating someone down for, I mean, the case in Denver, a guy was talking on a cell phone, and it was caught on video, and the police beat him down. I mean, why are the police unions and the office standing behind him instead of shunning him and wanting to get rid of him?
It's a long and complicated answer. I probably would have to talk to you after this to give you the full response, but let me give you the short version. In many instances, that behavior is condoned, and sometimes race comes into play. A lot of times, what we've seen here in St. Louis, in particular, there's no comfortable way to talk about it. When I talk about race, since I'm getting ready to make these statements, I always like to preface my comments by saying this. A statement about white officers or white people or black people or whatever we want to talk about, there is no culpability in this room for the conditions that we have to talk about. We were born into this reality. These conditions pre-exist us. Our responsibility is to address them. But a lot of times, within that culture, it comes down to us, them, and who do we value, and whose humanity do we recognize? Ours, us, not his, not them. We do what we want to do. We are the authority. They are to be acted upon, and we will protect our interests and our narrative. We will protect our narrative at all costs. I was a good guy trying to do a dangerous job with a dangerous person. Look at what he looks like. Look where he lives. Look how he talks. Of course I did the right thing. How dare you question us? Come on, guys. Let's stand here with our U.S. flag stick pin on and our badge and look like the hero. And anybody who challenges us must be anti-everything that's right and good. And you must hate America on top of that.
Andy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I was a private security officer for some time. I remember enforcing rules and laws and orders that I didn't want to enforce. So even though, getting back to the point where you making, if you had a camera on a police officer and asking questions on the job, why would they enforce the rule? And they enforce the rule because they're told to do that, and our legislators / voters enact the law. So if you don't like the laws, you just change them, like the petition drive I was working on with John Payne and some people. And also, for a private police officer, it's one that you have private security, but when I call the police, and we have different private companies around, who will I call if I dial 911?
What? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess to answer your second question, there's a great book called The Enterprise of Law by Bruce Benson. I'd encourage anybody here that's interested in the subject to read it. It talks about the private, provision of law enforcement per se, but really, again, what this comes down to is incentives. And when this good or service is provided by a monopoly, they claim a monopoly on this. They steal money from people within an area and say, "You're our customers." They can't fire them, and then they say, "Oh, we're gonna enforce these laws whether you like it or not." And I would differentiate between law and legislation. Like law is, like a 5-year-old kid knows you don't steal, you don't hit, you don't lie, and we all know that. But the legislatures and people you're talking about, and like the politicians, they're creating arbitrary man-made legislation. They're saying, you don't have a right to put what substance you want in your body. You have to get these papers to start a business. You have to pay us this amount every year, and that's not legitimate to us, to me at least. And so the difference is these organizations, the government, it doesn't have to respond to market signals. So they don't say, "Oh, we sold X more percent of widgets this quarter as compared to last year." The way they can track their effectiveness is to say, "Oh, our department grew by 10%. We have more cops on the street," or "We have all these new toys to go out and use on people," or "We have all these new felonies that we can arrest people on." We're talking about pieces of paper. You said they look good on pieces of paper, like the policies that the St. Louis Department has, but how is it in reality? It's the same thing I would say to constitutionalists. Sure, on paper it looks pretty good, but a piece of paper can't constrain people. It can't constrain actions. We have to hold each other accountable through market mechanisms and not grant somebody authority. It's not a race thing. It's a individual versus authoritarian thing, and we have to quit granting other people authority over us.
I agree with you in part, but could you answer the 911 part? If we have all these individuals...
Well, it's easy. There would be, let's say everybody in this room is a private protection contractor, and whoever's number you decided to hire is who you call. Why does it have to be 911? It could be a speed dial number. They could put a button in your house. Whatever the market would come up with.
A good answer too is also to say we don't know exactly how it will look. We have examples throughout history, we have examples in other societies. We have examples in different microcosms, but we just have to know that granting this authority to a centralized monopoly is a bad thing. Think about education. Think about everything else that gets centralized. It just creates it's a poor product that's very expensive. And we're talking about
the military too.
No, I don't believe that's another subject.
Yeah, but we can talk later.
That experience is there.
All right.
Yeah, just a super brief commentary tagging on this discussion of a market-oriented security solution versus a state one. I've thought a lot about this, and basically, I think what it definitely boils down to is there are always going to be assholes that are going to love to abuse authority. And if they can't become cops because there's no police department, they're going to become private security individuals. And we're going to have to be just as vigilant.
But would you hire that company?
No, I understand there are market forces that affect it, but they're always going to be in the mafia if they're not in a private security company. They're going to be out running protection.
What business is the mafia going to do if there's no one on paper to say something's illegal?
I understand the point, but the long 100,000-year scope of human history has proven that assholes will always exist and abuse people, and it is our duty as individuals, regardless of how we figure out, to be vigilant for those people. We're always going to have to videotape people and hold our fellow man accountable, be they private security companies, public cops, whatever. I think that's the thing to keep in mind. There's no panacea.
I don't know about that. But if we did have the private security and there would be assholes, I completely agree with that. And we were vigilant, and we got video evidence of them being abused, their personal assets would be liable.
Sure.
We would take them to court. As long as we don't have that situation, we can make all the videotapes we want, and we take it and we show them, and they investigate themselves, and they give themselves a week vacation.
I'm
So that's the only difference between absolutely, we would still have to be vigilant and still record. Just like any business, we have to be vigilant and make sure they're not using.
No, I'm not
The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. I believe that's out of Jefferson. Couple more questions. Yeah.
I have a two-part question. The first question is, what do you think about citizen arrests, other citizens doing things they shouldn't be doing? And the second question is, who would, in poor neighborhoods, who would pay for security? How would they have their security?
Okay, well, the first question was, what was the first question again?
Citizens,
Arrest,
not
okay.
just like police, but actually other citizens doing that.
Sure, well, I don't know if you can, I mean, I wouldn't arrest anybody, but I would definitely say I don't approve of this behavior, and if you're gonna do so, you know, I would move, like walk away, get away, tell my other friends about them, tell people I'm associated with that, like, this person does these things, I don't like that, and, you know, hopefully change their demeanor or their actions through those means. And then poor neighborhoods, well, if the building was owned by somebody that everyone is paying rent, that you know what I mean, they would have to cover that. There would be people that would provide protection at any market rate, and again, it goes to the answer of we don't know because we haven't ever seen it, but there's a bunch of things that could happen.
And to add on to that, I would, like, we're not just advocating for like the service of policing to be provided by the market. We think everything. So like the government, which today claims a right to 40% of your money, would be out of the way. There wouldn't be this parasitic organization like leeching on people who actually produce wealth. So the economy would be supercharged. People in poor neighborhoods, their standards of living would rise. There wouldn't be minimum wage laws preventing, like, causing unemployment. You know, things like this. So things would look different. But yeah, reputation would be very important for your first question. Ostracism.
Oh, okay.
Changing the subject slightly, on the issue of interaction with police officers, I mean, ultimately all police officers are humans, just like us. They're all likely to respond to overtures or provocation in similar ways to what we would respond to. I have personally been harassed by private security officers, taking pictures, things of that sort. Not by actual police officers, slightly different relationship there. I once saw a police officer right down here on Macleod at Euclid. I came out of the shop where I worked at the time, was closing up. A police officer was saying to a man, I've had complaints about you, I'd like for you to leave the neighborhood. The man was protesting that he had a right to be there. And the officer was saying, I heard this talking back and forth. Well, I'm just telling you I'd like for you to leave. There have been complaints about your behavior. When I came back out with my car from the parking garage, the man was face down on the pavement with a police officer's knee in his back, and the police officer was slapping cuffs on him. Now, if it had been me, and a police officer said, I've had complaints about you, I'd like for you to leave the neighborhood, I think I'd leave the neighborhood, personally. So, when you interact with police officers, seeing as how that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, how do you regulate yourself? I mean, when you say, I've got a right to be here, which you do have a right to be there, okay? Policeman hasn't had any complaints about you. He's not asking you to leave the neighborhood, but he's telling you to quit filming. How do you, I mean, do you make an effort to be as unconfrontational as possible in the insistence upon your rights?
But yeah, I mean, I always try to be
consciously do.
Yeah, I always try to be calm, cool, collected, and talk. And like I said, I always try to ask questions to them.
Okay.
So like, even like we were in Philadelphia recently, and the officer, we were engaging them about illegally parking. They were illegally parked while standing on the street, like monitoring not only the thing but watching for like illegally parked cars.